Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and this week's deep dive is going to be on China and how China is essentially one trying to establish medical dominance, but now they're using TikTok and TikTok's parent company ByteDance to do that. And obviously TikTok has exploded over the world, so why not use it as an opportunity? Now, the backdrop for this, or what gave me the inspiration for this, stems from an article I recently read in Forbes by Alexandria Levine. And full disclosure, I also publish in Forbes as well. But before we dive into Miss Levine's work, let's actually look at the backdrop that the information she delivered in her article actually lives in. China is trying to become the dominant world leader in both data and medicine. Between 2017 through 2022, China almost tripled its preclinical and clinical development of pharmaceutical drugs. Now, China's pharmaceutical sector has also grown almost 80% in the decade of 2010 to 2020 and continues to expand. Now, on the data dominance side, according to the Hoover Institution, China's Communist Party, or CCP, has basically built a large institutional architecture to draw the world's data resources towards China. Now, based on the CCP's own documents, the Hoover Institute reported on basically how the party has created a policy and regulatory architecture or framework to exploit data as the fundamental resource of the future global economy and governance systems. And they are exactly right. Data now is more valuable than gold. So essentially, I've talked about this particular law that stems from the CCP in China for years, because China has created a centralized national data infrastructure controlled by their party. Now, the party's interlocking data security laws and surveillance systems mean that all customer data held by China-controlled companies will be accessible to China's security services. That's that 2017 law I've talked about that I'm referencing here from the Hoover Institution. Now, China uses data requisitioning from commercial handlers to build databases, manipulate online information, mine telecommunication networks, and also target journalists. Now, on top of that, they're also moving into DNA information gathering as well. And the best known example of that issue at stake here is the BGI Group. Now, if you don't know who they are, they're a biotech Chinese company, Chinese biotech company that provides genomic sequencing and proteomic services. Now, BGI's establishment of the China National Gene Bank in Shenzhen in 2016, which is owned by the state but is run by BGI, has given BGI an advantage in the data storage infrastructure and the advantage of scale for its diagnostic business. BGI's partnerships with international companies, including Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, NR Gene, and more, have enabled it to develop larger data sets. Now, BGI's data is at risk of being accessed by the Chinese government, as genetic resources are national strategic resources and the foundation upon which China is essentially trying to compete for the future bioeconomy. Remember that law. If you have data on basically foreigners from these independent companies you've partnered with around the world, the Chinese security services get access to this. Now, BGI has been accused of facilitating human rights abuses in China as well, and its subsidiaries basically have their own system of party cells within the Communist Party themselves. That's how big they are. And so that's the backdrop that Andrea Levine's Forbes article basically is on, because TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is now doing something rather alarming. And that's basically traditionally out of scope for their company. And so here are some key elements from that article that I'm either paraphrasing or quoting directly, because I thought she did an excellent job on this. And this, I think, is a real important one. Now, ByteDance appears to be ramping up work in fields beyond social media, which is what they're known for. They're ramping up biology, chemistry, natural sciences, and pharmaceuticals as well. They're recruiting American talent now in computational biology, quantum chemistry, molecular dynamics, and physics for its, quote, AI for drug design and AI for science teams. Those are two separate teams, and that's according to LinkedIn posts that have been reviewed by Forbes. Now, ByteDance also appears to be hiring for at least 17 of these positions across New York, California, and Washington, obviously going after other rivals that are in this game like Meta, Google, Amazon, etc., etc. All three of those, for the record, have this similar work underway. Others basically leading this effort at ByteDance appear to be based in Chicago, Boston, and Beijing, according to LinkedIn. Now, the AI for drug design team aims to, quote, revolutionize drug discovery. We are dedicated to pushing the boundaries of AI-driven drug design, tackling complex challenges in protein structure prediction, molecular conformation analysis, and computational protein design. By combining our passion for scientific excellence with the transformative power of AI, we aim to accelerate drug discovery and make meaningful impact on global healthcare, end quote. Now, ByteDance's AI for Science group, meanwhile, quote, has been focusing on tackling challenges in natural sciences, including biology, physics, and materials. That's according to listings for research scientists in computational biology and quantum chemistry in Seattle postings. Now, those interested in molecular dynamics in New York will be responsible for pursuing, quote, novel strategies for computer-aided drug discovery and advancing free energy methodologies, end quote. Now, it's unclear at this time, per this Forbes article, how drug discovery or its development or other scientific focused efforts are actually going to fit into ByteDance's core competency of social media, just literally sensations like TikTok and TikTok's Chinese counterpart Douyin. But interestingly enough, there are some indicators here. Now, experts said that from TikTok and other platforms owned by ByteDance, specifically the data that they are collecting could be highly valuable for these scientific initiatives. The development of new drugs or medical treatments, according to experts in pharmaceutical, or our experts and pharmaceutical companies typically work around what is called the target product profile. That's a rubric that helps them distill what their optimal drug would look like, the conditions or key problems they'd address with it, who their ideal patients are, and who their candidates or potential markets are as well. And so by virtue of that, they can use data from TikTok to start discerning that. Experts also said TikTok, where many people are drawn to basically health and wellness content, talk openly about medical issues. I've talked about that consistently. Why are we giving up such personal information to social media? Not just TikTok, Facebook, and everywhere, but many people are drawn to basically these wellness and fitness content. They also, like I said, talk about medical issues, but they regularly seek information on what has or hasn't worked for others. And so that serves as an invaluable feedback loop and marketing tool for drug developers. In other words, if you can consistently just data mine TikTok to say, oh, I used X and X didn't work for me, and other people say, oh, X worked great. Now you start to see perceptions change, as people interact with each other, or as one person influences, unfortunately, others, even though they, let's say, have no medical training, they've simply used and liked the product. Results may vary. Now, sending data collected from basically like TikTok Shop and other in-app purchases could also be useful to track basically what kind of medical things people are buying. So with that, Ed Paraxlis, he's a former chief scientist for the FDA who previously helped pharmaceuticals R&D for Johnson & Johnson, basically the research and development guy for J&J, called this, quote, surveillance capitalism basics. Everything that you can extract from those things, they do. Given that they're a social media company and given that they don't have life science divisions that are consenting patients, taking samples or running mice and rat studies and stuff like that, their own data, I think it's a fair assumption that somehow they're accessing data. In other words, because they don't have, those rats in cages that we can pump full of drugs or whatever it is, or patient trial studies going on, where is TikTok or ByteDance, going to be getting this data? They're going to be getting it from TikTok. That's essentially what we're talking about here. And if you're an American, you are literally feeding the massive Chinese security state your information and helping them improve their pharmacology, their biology, their pharmaceuticals, all of that. Now, Douglas Schmidt, Associate Provost for Research and Co-Director of the Data Science Institute at Vanderbilt, noted that many young Americans are medicated for ADHD, anxiety, and other mental health conditions. Quote, based on the kind of videos that young TikTok users watch, or the content that they consume, it might provide insights as to conditions that they're facing. If you could find a way to sell products that would be appealing to them, you can certainly imagine building up a robust pharmaceuticals industry or a competitive product and then advertising it on TikTok. Now, switching back to Paraxlis, he mentioned as well, and I quote, they could be doing large-scale hypothesis generation with all this data, and then they could be feeding that data into Chinese pharmaceutical companies or Chinese weapons manufacturers or Chinese whatever. Now, beyond drug discovery or repurposing, he also noted that language used in these roles could also portend work in food science, agrochemical, petroleum, fuel sciences, or even bioweapons. Experts said that basically the roles signal that TikTok's owner is looking to channel its AI prowess embodied best by essentially the TikTok algorithm that steers the ultra-personalized For You feed into other revenue streams. In other words, they're leveraging the AI in TikTok not just to data mine, but also to guide, let's say, those developments in those other fields to, let's say, the right users. Now, this hypothesis then also jives with the job description. Those joining ByteDance's, quote, multidisciplinary drug discovery team will be tasked with applying inventive algorithms, end quote, to its work and developing algorithms for antibody design. Other hires will build, quote, cutting-edge machine learning technologies in scientific areas like biology, physics, and materials, end quote. Now, last year, interestingly enough, ByteDance also bought Chinese hospital chain Amcare for $1.5 billion. That was a push to establish a foothold in the space after ByteDance basically acquired online medical encyclopedia Baichemy in 2020 and subsequently launched a suite of healthcare apps under the name Ziahe. Now, what's different, though, on this case is that ByteDance appears to be expanding those efforts beyond China itself into the United States, and they're hiring scientists and PhDs, and as I mentioned, at least 3 and possibly more U.S. cities. And in doing so, it's essentially planting a flag in a market where some of its biggest American competitors have their own science, research, or health-focused initiatives underway and edging into the AI research talent pool as well. Basically, if they're willing to offer more money, then they can start siphoning off from American companies. But this is a huge problem. This is also the reason why I haven't done the 23andMe's, because as these companies go public, the investors can use shell companies from outside of the United States or outside of the United States. Companies can use shell companies to essentially start purchasing this stuff and accessing this. Understand what China poses here as an issue. They're the largest data miner in the world. On top of it, due to their Belt and Road Initiative, they are pushing their authoritarian style, heavily filtered internet into authoritarian countries where the leaders can actually monitor what the citizens are doing. And if they have advanced knowledge and health information, they could be developing bioweapons. They could be developing, let's say cures and whatnot. And hey, if they find a cure for cancer, I think the world is all for that. But the problem that you have here is that nothing is private when it comes to China. And unlike the Facebooks of the world, where we have legal recourse here in the United States or the EU, try suing a Chinese corporation. You're not going to go anywhere. So this is a huge issue that I think the world is going to face. And one of the next war fronts, if you will, in nations competing is going to be biotechnology, biomedicine. We are continually, looking at the DNA and the entire genome to see how we can extend life, how we can kill disease, how we can improve on these kinds of things. And while that's great and excellent for, let's say, the long-term health of the human race itself, we also have the political side of this. And China is making huge waves. And as an authoritarian government, that should be terrifying to basically everybody that is not living under an authoritarian government, or hopefully soon won't be. So this is a problem, and I think we've got a serious issue with this, and I'll leave it at that. But that is essentially your deep dive of the week. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.